Okay, this is Moxlogic, a new logical system, part 2. And we're taking a look at this entirely new, bright colored logical system. But I'm not going to go over anything from the first video. If you're just clicking into this, you've got to go and look at the first video. And it explains the whole setup for the whole thing. In this part, we're going to begin to look at how it is. We've covered a lot of the basic structure of what's going on with the thing, and we're going to look at how it is an actual, real, universal, working logical system. So basically, in this diagram, up on the left there, this is, if you just type in isotopes of hydrogen, this gives you this chart. And you can do that for every single atom the chemists have put together, and it's all on Wikipedia. These very nice charts that give you all kinds of information about all the different forms of atoms. So every different atomic element has multiple different forms, and it's always based upon the neutrons. It'll have one set number of protons, but lots of different neutrons. For example, the gold atom has 79 protons, and it's what's called monoisotopic, meaning it only has one stable form with 118 neutrons. The smallest one has 90 neutrons. The largest one has 131 neutrons. So that tells you there are 41 different isotopes. But if you look at the Wikipedia page and count, there are a total of 87 different total forms. And the chemists don't call all of these allotropes. They call some of them isomers, which is, it gets into some complicated stuff. But I think the chemists are going to need to sort of redefine the idea of what allotropes are, because basically what I'm saying is, with gold, if you have 87 different total forms, each one is going to be a different Moxlogic form. So what I do when I'm working in Moxlogic is, first I make a chart for an element, and I'm going to make all the different Moxlogic forms. And so my chart here is on the right. And you can see, like with hydrogen, there are 7 total forms, 4 flat forms, and 3 standing forms. So what are the flat and standing forms? Well, this is really interesting. You look here at this slide, and every different atom either is going to be flat on top, like on the left here, or it's going to be turned on its side. And so it's going to have a pointy section on the top and on the bottom. And what it is even though the Moxlogic system is hexagonal in nature, it's interested in right, left, and top, bottom here in the two-dimensional form. It's really only dealing with two, the up, down, and the right, left dimension. And flat atoms have to be right, left symmetrical. For the standing atoms, you see it's got that one row in the center, so it can have an odd number of neutrons. And across the atomic spectrum, there are many, many more flat atoms than standing atoms. There are simply more of them, and more of them are stable. We and the greater life that we're creating are standing atoms. They're much, much smaller numbers, much more rare, much fewer stable forms. And yet I think they are somehow the thing that brings the whole structural system sort of to life. But so, okay, coming back, you go to Wikipedia, you build yourself a basic chart off of how many different forms you have to make. If it's gold, you have to make all 87 of them, and you start to make the chart. So we're just going to very quickly here look at the chart for the very first atom, hydrogen. And so this is hydrogen, basically a proton by itself. Technically, I think it's flat. I generally show it as standing because I think it can do anything it wants as just the proton. But it would technically be a flat proton by itself. But then the deuterium with one proton and one neutron is a standing form. And then here you have you see there's still, with every one of these, you just have the one proton, but then you have the two neutrons in the center there, and then on the bottom left you have with 3 neutrons, and then you can see it with 4 neutrons on the right. And then it's here with the one with 5 and 6 neutrons where you see this is the same form, because every atomic element, including hydrogen, always makes a large hexagon. The largest outside is hexagonal. But so this is where you first see a place where you have a potential neutron instead of an actual neutron. Is in the one with 5 is a standing form, and then it just fills in that other neutron and turns into a flat form with 6 neutrons to go with the 1 proton. So looking here at a carbon atom, where you can see the nucleus, the white line in there is showing the nucleus, and you can see that there are 10 potential neutrons, but this form has 6 actual neutrons. So that means you're always going to have, as you get to these larger atoms, you're always going to have some potential neutrons. Some spaces, they're rainbow Mox cards within the nucleus, but they do not have the white dot. They are not an actual neutron. And so this becomes a very important rule, is that every full color Mox card that is fully surrounded on all 6 sides it absolutely must be a proton. But every rainbow Mox card does not have to be an actual neutron. It can be if it is fully surrounded, that means that it's in the nucleus, so it's a nuclear rainbow Mox card, but it becomes a potential neutron instead of an actual neutron. And this is going to be the key to this whole thing as a working logical system. This here is a molecule of carbon dioxide, and you got the carbon in the center, and it has 2 oxygens which are locked onto it, and you can just see the neutrons there. Now, the chemists focus, they say all the bonding stuff has to do with electron energies, where the electrons lock in with each other into these atomic shells. And so I'm not going to try to explain when you look at this image here, what this shows, you can see the actual protons in the nucleus. The forms that I show with the black circles are what I call temporary protons. They're temporary protons. They are full color Mox cards that were not fully surrounded when the atom was separate, when it was alone. But once it forms the bond, you can see that each one that I show with a round circle is now fully surrounded on all 6 sides. And so it becomes a temporary proton. And so I think that has something to do structurally. Each one of these Mox cards carry some kind of structural and positive and negative and different kinds of energies and stuff. And so I think the chemists are just going to have to work out what, this certainly has something to do with the structure of how atoms bond, but I think still the electron energies certainly are involved in it. But this is showing that the protons also are involved. And this is showing these are the temporary neutrons. And you can see there are even more temporary neutrons that were not fully surrounded, but that now, once these bonds form, are fully surrounded. And they want that. I mean, they're locking in to something there that brings them extra structure and extra energy and stuff like that. Remember that neutrons have positive electric quarks that carry 2/3 positive energy. And so it may be that the neutron electric quarks are why the negative energy electrons are willing to come in and lock around these atoms, because normally the negative electrons would push away from each other, I think. I mean, I'm not quite sure how the chemists explain all that, but so these are just some structural components for the chemists to think about as they study into this. So the big question here is, how are these atoms affecting their bonding? And so what you have these docks and spikes, and the docks are always made up by two neutrons next to each other where they have two like colors there, and that forms the docks. And the spikes, except in the hydrogen atom, you have the 6 yellow corners that I might call spikes in the hydrogen atom, but for every other larger atom, I would say a spike is a non-corner external full color Mox card. So it's one in the outer row, but I don't count the corner ones as spikes. It has to be somewhere along the interior face of the side. And so you're going to have a relationship, an energy and power dynamic relationship going on between these full color Mox cards, which remember are related to human beings or glial cells, and they're in the nucleus, as you could say government or the decision-making apparatus, like government is a decision-making apparatus. The proton cores in the nucleus are going to have a relationship with these spikes and docks way out in the third row, in the outermost row. And this is going to end up being how they control their bonding. And the way they do it is they wind up having motive patterns in the nucleus. And so let's study the different motive patterns. What the motive patterns want to do is they want to bond with their most symmetrical sides. So if you look here, these 3 blue protons in the nucleus, they form what I call a line motive, and they are a two-way bonder. They want to bond along either the top side of the atom or the bottom side. Look at the blue spikes on the bottom sides, and look at how awkward a bond would be for those 3 blue protons if they formed a side, so they don't want that bond. The next one, another form, is a single bonder. And this is what I call an MW figure. Right here, you're seeing it in a W figure, that the yellow is making the letter W, and it'll either make an M or a W. And what it wants is to get what I call a circle 7. If these 2 yellows along the top bond with another atom, they become temporary protons. And so with the 2 temporary protons locking in with the 5 nuclear protons, that would be a circle 7, so that's its most symmetrical object. Now, basically, when you get a motive for an atom, like this MW figure that has a single bonding motive, it will use any other yellow spikes or docks that it has to say no. And the rule is, on any side, if any dock or any spike says no, then the entire atom will just say no to bonding with that side. You're always going to have 2 colors on a side, and they both need to be saying yes for you to form a bond. So this one here, you can see the red triangle, and so it basically does not want to bond along I usually call the top of the atom, I call it the top surface, and then there's the 2 top sides, and then there are the 2 bottom sides, and then there's the bottom surface. That's just the most clear way to refer to this. So this red triangle does not want to bond with the 2 top sides, nor with the bottom surface, and it has docks and spikes in those places. So it's going to say no to that, but it wants to bond along the top or the 2 bottom sides is what it would be willing to bond with. This here is a diamond. This is the actual one of the allotropes of carbon-12. If you had a few billion of these, you could get married. This is a 4-way bonder. You can see here the methane atom that it forms when it grabs onto 4 hydrogen atoms. And so it is the main 4-way bonding side. Hydrogen itself is a six-way bonder, and you can see here an aluminum form that also, atoms don't bond with all six sides because they don't have enough energy. I think the most bonds they form is like 4, where the carbon atom forms a lot of 4s. But so this is sort of saying it will use any of its 6 sides. It'll choose 1 bond or 2 or 3 or however many, but all 6 sides are willing to bond. So let's just kind of do a quick review of those again. We have a single bonder, a double bonder, a triple bonder, the triangle. You have a quadruple bonder, the diamond bonder. You don't really have a 5-way bonder, but then you've got the 6-way bonder. And they all have larger forms as you get up into bigger atoms. This is a chlorine atom. And so you can see the red W is just what we described, and it wants to bond on the top. But then you can also see a larger yellow W form also. Line figures, again, want to form double bonds. Triangles, here you see a number of different triangles. They want to form 3-way bonds. And then you have the 4-way, like a carbon atom, or some of the larger diamond bonders, and the 6-way. So this here, you're looking at the argon atom, and you can just see that every atom that beyond the very first few is going to have 3 different sets of motives, and it's going to tell the atom how it wants to bond and where which sides are going to be active for bonding. And with this argon atom, if you look, the red triangle is saying no to the top surface and to the 2 bottom sides. The blue W only wants to bond along the top, which the red is already shut down, and it's now going to shut down both the 2 top sides and the 2 bottom sides. It's going to be shut down by the blue, and although the yellow wants to bond on all 6 sides, it only has the bottom, but the blue dots down there have already shut down the bottom. The blue basically is able to shut down all 5 sides, and then the red shuts down the top. And so what you see is, look at how the nucleus, you see the white line that shows the nucleus, and the neutrons with this argon atom, because all 6 sides are saying they don't want to bond, it holds the neutrons an extra row away. So there are 4 total rows instead of 3 total rows away from the outside. And that's why this argon atom is one of the noble gases that doesn't bond. It's not putting out any bonding energy. It's holding all of its bonding energy 4 rows away from the outside of the atom. So let's just look further into this. This is an oxygen atom. It has 8 protons, and it actually has 8 neutrons, but what I'm showing you here is 6 of them are protected. It has 6 protected spots that are 4 rows away. But then it has to put 2 of them somewhere out there, which are going to end up activating a side for bonding. These smaller atoms kind of have such small nuclei, they always are somehow activated for bonding. And so you can see if it puts it in these top 2 sides, then those are just 3 rows away. And so what it's going to want to do is grab 2 hydrogen atoms and form an H2O molecule. It's just got a perfect little setup there, putting off enough energy to grab a couple hydrogens, and it's going to deactivate the top side because the neutrons are 4 rows away. Here I don't show the whole field from all of the neutrons, but you can see basically that when it has the neutrons in the outside there, it's putting, going roughly over 4 or over 3 and up to 4, and sometimes maybe a little over 4 rows. And that's how it grabs the hydrogen atom. And then if it moves it up on the top, then it's 3 rows from the top, and so it'll bond something along the top. So if oxygen atom is holding on to 2 hydrogens, and it suddenly sees a carbon atom and it wants to bond with that carbon atom, then it's going to release the two hydrogens just by moving its two neutrons from the sides and putting them up along the top, and then that will cause it to bond with the carbon atom. But so the big question then is, how do atoms move these neutrons? And this is where the whole thing really comes to life as a living logical system. So the way it does it is it has these three different color motives in the nucleus, and they are these three different colors, and it can turn, and they're tied in with the docks and spikes, and it can change the colors of those proton motives, the triangles, the lines, those kinds of things. It can change the colors, and then that changes the motives. So the way it works, it's the same as the DNA molecule. Look at the center one there where you have a yellow proton. So the reds and blues cannot move into a yellow spot, and the yellow can't move into a red or blue spot. Those three always have to remain separate. So it can follow its true motives with the yellow, or if it goes green, you look at the single rainbow Mox card is a color chart. And so you have, every time you're looking at Moxlogic, you don't have to memorize it. You just check the color chart. When it's green, when yellow follows the color blue, when the yellow motives say, hey, we want to do what the blue ones are doing, instead of doing what we naturally want to do, we want to follow the blue, then it would show the color green. If it wants to follow what the red is doing, then it would show the color orange, because the color orange is half yellow, half red. So it's saying that yellow is following the color red. And then it can also do its opposite. It can say, if I'm a triangle that wants to bond on the top but not the bottom, and it does its opposite, now it's going to want to bond the other way, with the other 3 points of its triangle. So let's just have a look at this. This is a sodium that has 11 protons and 12 neutrons. And so the black dots along the top, I use the dots on the outside of the atom to show what its motives are. And so if you don't see any green, violets, or oranges within the nuclear protons, then that means you're looking at its natural motives. And so this sodium's natural motives are to be a single bonder. So let's just check that. You have the yellow that wants to bond only along the top, and it's going to shut down the two top sides. The blue is going to shut down the two bottom sides, the blue line, and the red triangle is going to shut down the bottom, and the blue line is agreeing with the top. So both of the two top sides, the two colors on top, are saying yes, and it's shut down the other 5 sides. So this becomes a single bonder, which is what the motives of sodium are. This is a stable form of sodium. And so what it can do then is it can turn its blue line. It can say the blue line is now following the red. Remember, just check the chart. It's going to follow the red. So now, instead of wanting to bond along the top and bottom, it's still, the red triangle wants to bond along the top, so it still wants to bond along the top, but it also additionally is going to use its blue spikes along the side to say yes to bonding along the two bottom sides. Here now, you're seeing the color purple again, but they mean something different because they're inside the red. So you kind of have to remember with Moxlogic, it can be complicated where you're seeing sometimes the same color but meaning very different things. Here, the red is now following the blue. The blue is in its true form, so it wants to bond along the top and bottom. Normally, the red is using its red spikes on the bottom to shut that down, and now it's just saying, no, we'll follow the blue and become a two-way bonder along the top and the bottom. And here is where the yellow is doing its opposite, so a third meaning for the color violet. So it's now saying it wants to not bond along the top anymore. It's using its yellow spikes along the top to shut down the top, and it would be saying yes to the two top sides, but the red triangle is still shutting those down, so those are still shut down. And the red triangle is also still shutting down the bottom, but now the blue is following the red, and it wants to bond with the two bottom sides, and the yellow is shutting down the top. So this can be a single bonder, it can be a three-way bonder, it can be a two-way bonder along the top and bottom, which might lock in with two larger atoms, and then this would be a form that might lock in with, two hydrogen atoms or something like that. This here is a second stable form of sodium. Now, the chemists say that sodium, they say this about fluorine and aluminum and a bunch of these different atoms. They call them monoisotopic, where they only have one isotopic form and no allotropes. But as I've studied into this Moxlogic system, if you look at the last one, it is what I would call a dock-centered atom. On the top center, which is its main bonding surface, it has a dock. This one has a spike. And I think every atomic form needs to have both a male and female bonding form. But these two atoms are so similar with each other that they're going to wind up forming atoms with basically the same structure. Atoms form into complex, you have cubical or hexagonal or different types of structure. These two are so similar that I think they both form whatever kind of structure one does, the other one does. But I think there will be ways to test this. The chemists will figure it out, but I'm saying that Moxlogic is predicting, as you study into it, it is predictive, saying that you have to have like two allotropes, but one is male and female, and they're often very, very similar to each other. So you may not be able to know that they are two allotropes unless you really are looking for it or something. But anyway, just quickly, so just to keep studying this one can become a three-way bonder by having the yellow follow the blue triangle. It can become just a two-way bonder. Here, as you can see, it can become a single bonder on the bottom if it gets both of the two triangles to want to bond along the bottom instead of enclosing down the top side. So atoms kind of have different kinds of IQs, and some can do lots of different things. And carbon, I would say, is, for me, the most famous for that. Carbon is very high IQ. Its forms can do all sorts of different things. And some atoms just can't do that much. They just don't have the tools to be able to do, single bonding, double bonding, triple bonding. It just shows up differently in each different atom. But so we've answered. Let's come back here and look at, here is a molecule of H2O. The oxygen is holding on to the two hydrogens. And the way it has to do that is the yellow has to say, it has to shut down both the top spot and the bottom spot. And so when it does its opposite, it's using its top docks and bottom docks to close those off. And then it has to tell those two neutrons to go somewhere. And so it either needs to use the blue triangle or the red triangle. And so here it's using the red by the red triangle doing its opposite. It's saying, okay, now we want to bond along this top side. We want to use those two red spikes there and activate them. So the red just does its opposite. That tells those extra two neutrons where to go, and it forms the H2O molecule. And so now it sees the carbon atom and it wants to release the hydrogens. And so it simply just turns the red triangle back into a red triangle. And now those two neutrons either now are going to pop into the top position or they're going to go into the bottom position. So the yellow now, instead of being purple, it's going to go red and say follow the red, which wants to bond, the red triangle wants to bond along the top. So now the two yellow docks and the red spike at the top become activated, and it bonds together with that carbon atom. This is just a quick look at the isotopic and allotropic structure, at how Moxlogic makes up the basic structure of atoms. But I want to end with three just very significant things that we've learned here that this is telling us. One of the things that this is telling us is, look here again at this carbon form. Okay, so you're imagining that this nucleus is the size of a pea. It's a tiny, tiny little nuclear object. And it's surrounded by these three rows that go out as far as a football field. And what I'm telling you is when it moves, the neutron cores, what might be the distance of about a tenth of a pea, it's within that pea, it's going to make a tiny little movement of a neutron inside that pea. And this is going to take, it could take an energy field which is reaching all the way out over the top surface of this atom and change it to going over the bottom surface or the bottom two sides or something. So how could that be possible? Well, what it has to be saying to us is these neutrons are obviously computer switches. They're electronic switches. And so when it moves the neutrons around in the nucleus, it's like it's hitting different computer or electronic switches that then change the energy field, computationally. It's not physically, it's not possible that it could move the neutron cores that tiny little tenth of a pea and that would bring about such a huge, massive switch of the entire energy field. So you know that you're dealing with something like neurons or like computers. The second big thing this tells us that we've discovered here is there's just no question that atoms are built. I mean, they are 100% built to make decisions. Now, am I saying every single atom is alive? Well, I don't know. I mean, we know here on our planet Earth, there are trees that are alive, but do they make decisions? Cows have a certain IQ. Humans certainly make decisions. But whatever you want to say, about the level of intelligence or whether some of them could just be reactive to situations, like when they're getting pulled into something, maybe they are forced into making a choice or something. But basically, atoms make decisions. They are built. Everything about their entire structure is based upon the conceptual structure for making choices, making decisions. And the third huge thing that this is telling us is, look again here at this carbon atom. So you have a tiny little nucleus, the size of a pea, and it's going to send these signals out. Now, these inside an atom, these are going to go out as virtual photons. When an atom sends out a real photon, that means it has to go beyond just these three energy fields. It has to be some kind of big deal for it to release actual photons. But so like 99.999 something percent of the photons that it releases get absorbed by these outer Mox cards, the outer full color or rainbow Mox cards. And what that is, those virtual photons, and think what this is saying. This is not just atomic structure. This is human neural structure. This is what we're looking at here is the neural and glial cell structure of a brain. I mean, this is just, if you think of our brains being at a cellular level, it would be about the same distance of having these little tiny cells in our brain, which then send out these long axons way out into our body. And the virtual photons are the neural signals going out the axons, and where it causes changes in the energy fields, which cause movement and bonding and releasing and things. That same system is basically what's going to be used to move our bodies. So we are really looking here not just at the root of atomic structure, but we're also looking at the root of neural and brain structure. In the next video, we need to begin to tie some of this stuff with the Moxlogic. Really, we're not coming back to this isotopic stuff. We're going to take a look at a way the Moxlogic system shows us something multidimensional that we're going to need, that's going to be very important for us to understand as we start getting into some of the economics and thinking about how we're going to build our greater self. There's just an important concept, and so we're going to spend the next video working on that. Thank you.